So I'm Rob from Planiac in London. We're an indie studio. We do some games for work for hire, and we're also doing our own independent games as well. And what I wanted to talk about today is design by conversation. I'm the kind of founder of the studio, and I'm the game designer in the studio, but I don't feel that makes my job telling people what the game is going to be. I feel it's really important that everyone in our studio has a voice in what we make, and I want to work with people who have something to say about the games we're making. That's really important. It's really important to have conversations within the studio. I also feel we're very fortunate that we've always had really diverse teams in our games, and that's something that hasn't been a policy that we've adopted. It's almost been something that we just didn't accidentally have a policy not to adopt, and that's what's made those conversations also really valuable. Like having lots of different voices in the room is really important to make games really good. So. When we're designing our games, so the first game I wanted to talk about is one that we made called International Racing Squirrels. And I'd made this game just after I'd been at the game design workshop at GDC in San Francisco, and I'd learned about prototyping games, paper prototyping. And when we made this game, what I really wanted to do was make a prototype and take it out and work with that in the studio, but also take it out into the world. So it was about seeing what conversations we could have beyond the walls of the studio, as well as what we'd usually done within the walls of the studio. So we took this game to pubs in the UK, and we sat around and we drank, and we talked to, we had our own team in the game, in the pub, but also we had like regular, ordinary, drunken people kind of telling us what they thought about the game. And this was the first time I could see the value of having conversations with different random people about our games. The next game we made was a game called Cat on Your Head, which is a crowd game for between 20 and 1,000 people. I've played it with crowds of all of those sizes. And the thing about Cat on Your Head, it's a game where people shout out and the room itself becomes a kind of human computer, and we run the game on the people and they process the game. But it's just made out of words. It's actually a game that is made out of conversation. The whole game really is a conversation. Everyone in the room talks and shouts and says things like cat or mouse or other kind of silly things, and then we reinvent the game as we go. And it's also a game about reinventing itself. It's a game about redesigning the very game itself as you play it. So it's also a design conversation. And what happens when people play the game is people will shout out with a suggestion about how we change it, and then we all, as a room, work out what to do next with the game, and that carries on. And that's been kind of played by lots of people around the world. And I've kind of run it at various events and things, and it's always been a really kind of, I was meant to be advancing these slides a bit faster while I was talking, so I'm now going to jump through lots of them. But it's always been quite a fun game to run in different places. And then about a year ago, working with Jerry Carpenter, who's this amazing illustrator who does KBS Games Toilet on Venus Patrol, we made a book of the game, and this means now I get tweets that the game is being run in places like, it was Tokyo last week, hasn't been run in Berlin yet actually, but over the States and places like that. So when I came to make our next game, Insane Robots, which as Lorenzo said we're showing tonight, I wanted to make sure we were having conversations around the game. And the first thing I did was make this deck, and this took about 15 minutes to make, and it meant then in the studio we were playing the game immediately, like minutes later. But then I had the opportunity to take this game out as I was going to conferences around the world and play the game in different places. This is Indiecade in Los Angeles at the Culver Hotel. This is Game Camp in London. And this is playing over pizza at Indiecade East in New York, where we had to be really careful not to get grease all over our plastic tokens. Luckily, they were laminated in plastic. This is playing with brilliant game designer Alan Hazelden on a plane, where we played the game on a plane. We came up with new ideas for the game whilst on a kind of 12-hour flight, I think it is, from LA to London. This is in Geek in Margate, and lots of other places. And we just continue to have this conversation and have lots of game designers talking about our game, talking with us about our game, sharing the game with us. And that's what I think is really key and almost definitive of the indie scene for making games, is that what I discovered, and what I'm sure you've all seen as well, is that we all have these amazing conversations around our games. We're all very open and sharing about how we make our games. And that ability to share and not be restricted perhaps by NDAs or corporate policy or stuff like that means we can be creative and do really good stuff. So I kind of want to wrap up to say, let's make sure that we all carry on having design conversations, talking about our designs together, making sure that everyone is part of that conversation. All kinds of voices are in those game design conversations, and making better and better games because of that. Thanks very much. So I'm just going to, that was too long a pause there. I'm just going to mention those games. RacingSquirrels.com is where you can find out a bit about the racing game. We're actually releasing it on Steam at some point this year. It was out in browsers a while ago on an iPad, but it's coming to Steam this year. Cat on Your Head is up on its own site where there's a PDF and a book. And Insane Robots we're showing tonight, and it's coming out on Steam at some point, probably this summer. Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for your applause.